The bank was buzzing that morning, the kind of weekday rush where voices blend into a steady hum of stress and transactions. Behind the main counter stood Manager Davis, a man who measured people by the shine of their shoes and the logo on their watch. He strutted across the marble floor like he owned it, throwing out fake smiles and cold stares. His motto was simple: if you don't look rich, you don't belong here. Then the glass doors opened. A man walked in quietly, holding an envelope in one hand and peace in his eyes. No guards, no suits. No expensive cologne, just jeans, a plain shirt, and a small wooden cross hanging from his neck. Some tellers looked up and then back down, assuming he was just another walk-in, maybe someone asking for loose change or account help. But Davis noticed. He squinted at the necklace, curled his lip, and whispered to his assistant, "Here comes another church dreamer. Watch this." Jonathan Roumie stepped up to the counter, his tone gentle but confident. "Good morning," he said. "I'd like to make a small deposit, please." Davis forced a laugh loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "Oh, a deposit, huh? What are you depositing, Blessings?" The tellers chuckled nervously, not because it was funny, but because that's what they'd learned to do when the boss mocked someone. Jonathan didn't react. He just smiled faintly, like someone who'd seen arrogance many times before. He reached into the envelope, but before he could hand it over, Davis snapped, "Hold it. Let me guess. You're one of those charity guys trying to cash in a fake check, right? We don't serve your type here. Go back to your church." The lobby went silent. Customers turned their heads. Jonathan simply said, "I'm sorry you feel that way," and placed the envelope on the counter. Davis leaned forward, eyes full of mockery. "Save the holy talk for Sunday, preacher. This is a bank, not a confession booth." What no one in that room knew, not the tellers, not the customers, not even Davis himself, was that the man he just humiliated was about to change his life, and the future of that bank forever. The lobby of Royal Crest Bank gleamed like a palace of glass and gold. Polished floors reflected the morning sun, expensive paintings lined the walls, and the faint scent of luxury perfume floated through the air. For manager Richard Davis, this wasn't just a workplace, it was his personal stage. Every morning, he arrived in his custom gray suit, gold cufflinks, and a smirk that said, "I'm better than you." He loved to make an entrance, his shoes clicking sharply against the marble as he barked orders at tellers who barely looked up anymore. "Keep those lines moving," he shouted, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the teller window. "And someone clean that glass, and fingerprints are bad for business." He thought power meant control and control meant fear. No one argued. They all knew what happened to the last employee who did. That's when the doors opened, quietly, humbly, and Jonathan Roumie stepped inside. No fanfare. No entourage. Just a calm presence that somehow softened the noise around him. His clothes were simple: worn jeans, plain shirt, and that small wooden cross resting against his chest. He walked with the ease of someone who didn't need to prove who he was. But to Davis, humility looked like weakness. He eyed Jonathan as he crossed the floor, whispering to his assistant, "Another charity worker. These people think good intentions pay bills." Jonathan approached the front counter, waiting patiently as the teller finished with another client. When it was his turn, he smiled politely. "Good morning. I'd like to make a deposit to a charity fund account." "Please." The teller glanced nervously toward Davis, who was already walking over with that familiar mix of arrogance and fake charm. Well, Davis said loudly, making sure everyone nearby could hear. "A donation, huh? From the looks of it, I'd guess. What, $10? Maybe 20? A few quiet laughs rippled through the lobby. Jonathan stayed calm. "Actually, sir, it's a bit more than that." "Oh, of course," Davis interrupted. "You all say that. Then you hand me a piece of paper with imaginary numbers on it." He leaned on the counter, towering over Jonathan, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "This is a bank for clients, not for Sunday school heroes." The old lady waiting behind Jonathan frowned. The young teller looked away. No one dared speak. Jonathan met Davis's stare, not with anger, but with grace. "I didn't mean to bother you," he said softly. "I just want to make sure this reaches the right people." Davis snorted. "Oh, I'm sure it will. Right into the shredder." He reached for the envelope Jonathan was holding, laughing under his breath. The moment Davis's hand touched the paper, something shifted in the air. The laughter faded. The background chatter stilled. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to quiet. Jonathan didn't look away. And in that silence, something about his presence and the calmness, the composure, made a few of the employees hesitate. Davis tore the top of the envelope open anyway, eager to find a reason to mock him. He slid the check halfway out and unfroze. His smirk wavered for just a second as his eyes caught the number. But pride is a dangerous thing. It doesn't like to admit mistakes. So he covered his surprise with a scoff. Cute, $1 million check? Handwritten, no less. Did you make this with crayons? The staff glanced at one another. $1 million? No one laughed this time, and except Davis. Jonathan stayed silent, his eyes kind but firm. Sometimes, he said quietly, you find the real value of a place by how it treats the people who walk in. That line landed like a pin drop. But Davis, red with pride, doubled down. Save your quotes for your sermons, preacher. This isn't a church and I'm not your disciple. He waved toward the security guard. If he's done wasting my time, show him out. The guard hesitated. He'd seen that cross before. He'd seen that face. But before he could say a word, Davis snatched the check from Jonathan's hand and stuffed it into the trash can beside him. There, that's where it belongs. Jonathan didn't react. He didn't raise his voice or demand respect. He simply said, "May peace be with you," turned his back to the counter and began walking slowly toward the door. The crowd in the lobby whispered. Some recorded on their phones. Others just stared, unsure if they'd just witnessed cruelty or karma beginning to stir. Davis brushed his hands together, proud of himself. Next customer, he barked, smirking. But as Jonathan's figure moved closer to the exit, a strange unease crept into the room, like everyone sensed something was about to happen. And they were right. Because in less than a minute, the very man Davis had mocked for his necklace would be the name printed on every document that bank owned. The echo of Jonathan's footsteps faded toward the glass doors. Each quiet step seemed to press against the noisy pride that still hung in the room. A few customers whispered to each other, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Behind the counter, Manager Davis straightened his tie, grinning at his own reflection in the security glass. "See," he said loudly. "That's how you deal with fakes. Confidence, people. You don't let anyone waste your time." The tellers forced small nods. One of them, a young woman named Emily, clenched her jaw. She had seen this scene before, and not the man with the cross, but the arrogance that came with Davis's title. She'd worked under him for 3 years, and every week someone new was humiliated. This time it felt worse. There had been something different about the man who walked in. Something peaceful, something steady. Emily glanced at the trash bin where the torn envelope and check rested on top of crumpled receipts. She could still see the corner of the check, the faint handwriting, the real ink, and though she couldn't read the full name, she caught enough to recognize it. "Wait," she whispered to herself. "That name looks familiar." Before she could say anything, Davis snapped, "Emily, stop daydreaming and handle the next client." She jumped. "Yes, sir." But her hands trembled as she tried to focus. Meanwhile, Davis turned toward the few customers still in line and raised his voice again, desperate to reclaim the attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smugly, "you see, in this business you learn to spot pretenders. We deal with real clients, real money, real investments." He didn't notice how hollow his words sounded, how the air in the bank felt heavy and awkward. People weren't impressed. They were uncomfortable. At the back of the room, an old man with a cane muttered, "That young fellow had more dignity than this one ever will." Davis heard him and shot back, "If you don't like how I run this place, you're welcome to leave too." The old man smiled faintly. "Don't worry. I'll leave soon enough, after I see what happens next." Outside, through the glass doors, Jonathan paused. He turned back for just a moment, watching the reflection of the building behind him, the same bank he'd quietly helped fund through charitable programs. Unaware that the man inside was burning his generosity to ashes, he didn't frown. He didn't curse. He just closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Inside, Davis's laughter echoed once more as he walked toward the trash bin, fishing out the check again just to make his point. He held it up between 2 fingers. "See this? You can spot a fake by the handwriting. Smooth talkers, dreamers, they all think they can trick their way into wealth, but not in my bank." He dropped it back into the trash, pulled a lighter from his pocket, and with one arrogant flick, ignited the edge of the check. A hush swept through the lobby. The tiny flame crackled, spreading across the paper until the ink curled and blackened. The smell of smoke mixed with perfume and air conditioning. Emily gasped softly. "Sir, quiet," Davis snapped. "Just taking out the trash." The customers backed away as the smoke rose. No one dared stop him. The burning check glowed in the dim light of the counter, a small symbol of pride devouring grace. Jonathan saw it from the doorway. He didn't move. He didn't rush back in. He simply whispered, almost to himself. Sometimes arrogance blinds the eyes that should see. He turned to leave, but inside, the silence was growing louder. The guard shifted uncomfortably. Emily's eyes watered from the smoke, but her discomfort wasn't from the smell. It was from shame. Finally, Davis stomped out the last ember with his shoe and brushed his hands. There, lesson learned, everyone. Don't fall for appearances. Money talks and faith walks. The old man with the cane chuckled softly. Funny, sometimes it's the other way around. Davis ignored him. Emily, open the next register. I've wasted enough time on nonsense, but Emily didn't move. Her gaze was fixed on the front door where Jonathan had just disappeared beyond the tinted glass. Her voice was barely a whisper. Sir, I think you just made a mistake. Davis frowned. The only mistake would be if you're still talking. She hesitated. That man, he looked familiar. I think I've seen him before. Maybe on TV or... Enough! Davis barked, slamming his palm against the counter. We don't worship celebrities here. The old man smiled again. Maybe you should start worshiping humility instead. Davis glared at him, his face flushed with anger, but the old man didn't flinch. Something about his calmness mirrored Jonathan's. Quiet, unbothered, untouchable. For a brief second, doubt flickered behind Davis's eyes. Then he shook it off, straightened his jacket, and forced a grin. All right, people. Back to work. We're done here. But deep down, everyone in that bank, even Davis himself, felt it. Something had shifted. And though the fire in that trash bin had gone out, a far bigger one was about to begin. For a long moment after Jonathan walked out, no one in the bank moved. The only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint crackle of burnt paper cooling in the trash bin. It felt like time itself was holding its breath. Then the whispers began. A customer near the front muttered, "Did he really just burn that man's check?" Another replied, "Yeah." "And for what?" "Because of a necklace." Emily swallowed hard. She glanced again at the half-burned check, the edges still curling with smoke. Something in her heart twisted. She couldn't explain it, but she felt like she'd just witnessed something important. Something she wasn't supposed to. Davis, however, was glowing with pride. He loved an audience, even one that silently disapproved. All right, everyone, he said, clapping his hands together. Show's over. Back to business. Some of us have real work to do. But no one laughed this time. No polite chuckles. No fake smiles. Just quiet faces and lowered eyes. The security guard, a heavy-set man named Marco, stepped closer to the counter. He looked at the ashes in the bin, then at Davis. Sir, I think maybe you went too far. That man wasn't causing trouble. Davis rolled his eyes. Please, don't tell me you're feeling sorry for some wannabe preacher. Marco didn't reply, but the silence in his eyes said everything. The old man with the cane chuckled softly from his seat. You ever notice, he said, that people who mock faith usually end up needing it the most? Davis spun around, his patience thinning. And who are you supposed to be? Another philosopher with a savings account. The old man smiled. Just someone who's seen pride fall before. And it never lands softly. Davis turned away, muttering under his breath. Enough of these cryptic old fools. But even as he spoke, he felt something strange. A creeping discomfort beneath his confidence. The laughter he usually drew from the staff wasn't there. The admiration, the fake validation, all gone. Emily broke the silence. Sir, maybe we should have at least checked the man's ID before... Before what? Davis snapped. Before we humored a liar? You think a man in jeans is walking around with $1 million check? Her lips pressed together. She didn't answer. But she didn't need to. Everyone in the room was thinking the same thing. What if he was wrong? Outside, through the glass walls, Jonathan was still visible, standing beside the curb, his phone in hand. He wasn't angry. He wasn't calling security or the police. He was calm, speaking softly to someone on the other end, and for reasons no one could explain, The sight of him standing there in a peaceful, patient, unbothered, made the arrogance inside that lobby feel heavier than ever. Marco kept glancing at him. "Sir," he said quietly, "you might want to take a look outside." Davis sighed dramatically. "What now?" He turned toward the glass doors and then froze. A sleek black car had just pulled up. Its engine purred like quiet thunder. The kind of car that didn't just arrive, it announced. Two men in tailored suits stepped out, followed by a woman carrying a leather folder. Their movements were sharp, efficient, the kind of precision that only comes from people who handle serious business. The customers near the entrance stepped aside instinctively. Even Marco straightened his jacket. "What in the world?" Davis murmured. The suited trio walked past Jonathan, giving him a respectful nod. Then they pushed through the doors of the bank, and every head turned. The woman spoke first, her tone clipped and formal. "We're looking for the branch manager. Richard Davis?" Davis's chest puffed up again, ego returning like a reflex. "That would be me. How can I help you?" The man beside her flipped open a folder. "We're here on behalf of the board of directors. We were told the new owner might be arriving today. A Mr. Jonathan Roumie." The name hit the air like lightning. A wave of murmurs spread across the lobby. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. The old man smiled knowingly. Marco blinked, whispering, "No way." Davis's grin faltered. I'm sorry, what name did you just say?" The woman repeated it calmly. "Jonathan Roumie. He's the new majority investor. I believe he just arrived a few minutes ago." A stunned silence followed. Davis's throat went dry. His mind raced back to the burned check, to the quiet man with the wooden cross, to the envelope he'd mocked. Outside, Jonathan stood by the car, talking quietly to one of the executives who had just arrived. Every step he took back toward the bank seemed to make Davis's confidence crumble a little more. Emily whispered, "I told you I recognized him." The old man with the cane chuckled softly again. There it is, in the sound of truth catching up. Davis felt the heat rise to his face. His gold watch suddenly felt heavier. His perfect tie too tight. He wiped at his forehead, forcing a shaky smile as Jonathan walked through the doors once more. This time, greeted with bows and handshakes from the suits, the same man he'd mocked, humiliated, and dismissed minutes ago now commanded the room without saying a word. And for the first time in his career, Manager Davis didn't know what to say. The glass doors whispered open, and Jonathan Roumie stepped back into the lobby. This time nobody looked away. The same people who had watched him leave in silence now stood frozen, eyes wide, hearts racing. Behind him, the three executives moved quickly, carrying sleek folders stamped with the royal blue crest of Royal Crest Holdings, the parent company of the very bank Davis managed. Their presence shifted the air. The chatter, the arrogance, even the hum of the lights seemed to bow down to something greater entering the room. "Mr. Roumie," said the lead executive, a tall man named Graham Lewis, "we're terribly sorry for the confusion. We expected the branch to be briefed on your visit." Jonathan smiled kindly. "It's all right. Sometimes the best lessons happen unplanned." His voice was calm, steady, like soft thunder before rain. Manager Davis tried to find his footing. "Wait a second. You're the new owner?" Graham nodded. "Majority shareholder, technically. The man whose charitable foundation rescued this branch last quarter." The words landed like stones. Every employee turned toward Davis. The man who bragged about control, who flaunted his authority, now stood trembling before the one person whose signature could erase his career with a single pen stroke. Jonathan stepped closer, not with anger, but with grace. "I came here to make a deposit," he said gently, "but I think I just discovered something worth far more than money." Davis swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "Sir, I didn't know who you were." Jonathan nodded slowly. "That's exactly the problem. You shouldn't have to." The line hit everyone in the room like scripture. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Marco exhaled the breath he'd been holding. Even the old man with the cane smiled and whispered, "There's the sermon." Jonathan turned to the executives. "Tell me, Mr. Lewis, how do you usually handle disrespect to clients?" Graham hesitated. "According to protocol, sir, termination is immediate." Davis went pale. He stammered, "Please, Mr. Roumie, I made a mistake. I thought you were—" Jonathan raised a hand, stopping him. "You thought I was less, because I didn't look like what you expect success to look like. He glanced around the room. I've seen that before, people judging worth by watches, by shoes, by titles. It's why kindness is so rare. Too many confuse wealth with value. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Jonathan turned toward the trash bin, still faintly marked by smoke. He reached in carefully and lifted what remained of the burned check, charred at the edges but still recognizable. He held it up for everyone to see. "This," he said softly, "was written not for me but for the children this bank promised to help. It was meant to fund a new wing at St. Anthony's Orphanage, a place that teaches love, not judgment." Emily covered her mouth. Marco whispered, "Oh, God." Jonathan placed the half-burned paper on the counter. "Sometimes," he continued, "fire doesn't destroy, it reveals. It shows what was hidden beneath the surface." He looked straight at Davis. "Tell me, Mr. Davis, what did the fire reveal in you?" Davis's voice trembled. "Arrogance, pride, ignorance," Jonathan nodded. "And now that you see it, what will you do?" I'll change," Davis said quickly, almost pleading. "I swear, sir, I'll be better. Please don't fire me." Jonathan studied him for a long, quiet moment. Then he turned to the old clerk who had remained kind through it all, Mrs. Henderson, the gentle woman who had greeted Jonathan when he first walked in. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, "I noticed how you treated everyone today with respect, even when your boss didn't." She looked startled. "I was just doing my job, sir." "That's exactly why I trust you to lead." The executives exchanged glances. Graham nodded approvingly. Jonathan faced Davis again. "From today, Mrs. Henderson is the new branch manager. You, Mr. Davis, will assist her if she allows it. Maybe humility will teach you what titles never did." The words landed like a gavel, final yet merciful. Tears welled in Davis's eyes. "Thank you, sir. I don't deserve this chance." Jonathan smiled faintly. "None of us do. That's why it's called grace." The crowd in the lobby broke into soft applause, tentative at first, then full. Customers clapped. Employees smiled through tears. Even Marco wiped his eyes. Jonathan turned to them all. "Let this place be known not for its marble floors or its numbers, but for how it treats people. Every client is a story, not a statistic." He started toward the door, stopping beside the old man with the cane. "You saw this coming, didn't you?" The old man chuckled. "I've lived long enough to recognize when pride is about to trip over peace." Jonathan laughed gently. "Then maybe you should be our next advisor." He shook the man's hand, turned to the staff one last time and said, "Remember, power doesn't prove who you are. Compassion does." As he stepped outside, sunlight poured through the doors, illuminating the ashes still resting in the bin. They shimmered softly like gold dust before the draft carried them away. Inside, silence lingered for a beat. Then Mrs. Henderson whispered, "Back to work, everyone. Let's make this place worthy of its new owner." And in that single moment, the bank that once worshipped arrogance learned what true wealth looked like. For a few seconds after Jonathan stepped out, no one in the bank spoke. It was as if time had frozen in reverence, as though everyone feared that even a whisper might break the sacred calm he left behind. Then slowly, the murmurs began. Customers leaned toward one another, whispering things like, "Was that really him? I can't believe it. Jonathan Roumie here. He's so humble." He didn't even raise his voice. The words filled the air. But none of them reached Richard Davis. He stood rooted to the same spot, staring at the glass doors that had just closed behind the man he'd ridiculed. His once perfect posture sagged under the weight of shame. The gold watch he'd always polished so proudly suddenly looked meaningless, a shiny chain around a hollow wrist. "Sir?" Emily's voice was soft, hesitant. "Are you okay?" He blinked, turning to her slowly, his tone stripped of its usual arrogance. "No, Emily, I'm not." He looked down at the trash bin where the ashes of the burned check had gathered like a small gray mountain. "That man came here with peace in his eyes, and I burned it because I couldn't see past my own pride." Emily didn't know what to say. She had seen him humiliate dozens of people, employees, customers, even vendors, but never like this. Never had he looked small. Never had he sounded human. Mrs. Henderson approached quietly, her gentle steps echoing through the lobby. "Mr. Davis," she said softly, "Mr. Roumie left this for you." She held out a simple envelope, clean, white sealed. Davis took it carefully, almost afraid to touch it. His fingers trembled as he broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet inside. It wasn't a termination letter. It wasn't a legal document. It was a handwritten note in Jonathan's calm script. Forgiveness isn't approval of the past, and it's belief in your future. Make this place worthy of every soul who walks through its doors. Jonathan? Davis's eyes welled with tears. He read the note twice, then pressed it to his chest. He whispered, "How can someone I disrespected show me more mercy than I've ever shown anyone?" Mrs. Henderson smiled faintly. "Because he practices what most people only preach." The words hit him deeper than any punishment could. He turned to the employees, his voice breaking. "Everyone, I owe you all an apology, especially you, Emily Marco, Mrs. Henderson. I've treated this place like it was mine, but it's not. It's ours." The staff exchanged glances, unsure how to react. This wasn't the Davis they knew. The Davis they knew barked orders, mocked mistakes, and bragged about bonuses. This Davis looked humble. "I've been so busy chasing respect," he continued, "that I forgot the only real way to earn it is by giving it." A long pause. Then unexpectedly, Emily smiled. "That's a good start, sir." Davis laughed softly through his tears. "No, Emily, from now on it's just Richard." The tension broke into a wave of quiet chuckles. Even Marco grinned. It wasn't the laughter of mockery anymore, it was release. The kind that comes after a storm passes. Mrs. Henderson placed a hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Roumie gave you a second chance, Richard. Don't waste it," he nodded firmly. "I won't." Over the next hour, the bank transformed. The smell of smoke was replaced by fresh air as Marco opened the doors wide. Emily helped rearrange the counters, replacing the fancy manager's desk sign with a simple wooden plaque. "Customer care. All are welcome." Customers who had witnessed the scene stayed behind, not to gossip, but to thank Mrs. Henderson and comfort Davis. One man said, "I've banked here for years. Today's the first time it's felt human." Richard smiled, humbled to his core. That means more than any profit report. As he cleaned up the ashes from the bin, he found a small unburned corner of the check still intact. The signature. Jonathan's name, written clearly in blue ink. He placed it in his wallet, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that respect isn't demanded. It's deserved. By the time the sun began to set, the mood in the branch had shifted entirely. Laughter returned, but it was lighter, freer. Mrs. Henderson, now officially the branch manager, gathered everyone around before closing. "Mr. Roumie gave us a chance to start fresh," she said. "Let's make sure no one who walks through that door ever feels small again." Richard nodded. "And that includes the boss," he said, smiling faintly. "Keep me humble," Marco chuckled. "Don't worry, we will." The room filled with warm laughter. Outside, through the wide glass doors, the fading light painted golden reflections across the polished floor. It was as if the very building was breathing again. Lighter, brighter, freer. And though Jonathan Roumie was long gone, his presence lingered, not in words, not in power, but in the quiet change that had taken root in every heart inside that bank. The next morning, Royal Crest Bank opened its doors under a new light, not just from the sun glinting off its glass windows, but from something brighter inside, humility. The air felt different. Customers were greeted with genuine smiles instead of forced politeness. The staff, once tense and silent under Richard's old rule, now chatted easily, helping each other instead of competing. Even the walls seemed warmer, as if the echoes of yesterday's arrogance had been scrubbed away, leaving behind only sincerity. At the far end of the lobby, the new branch manager, Mrs. Henderson, was arranging fresh flowers at the reception. She paused for a moment, looked up at the sunlight streaming in, and whispered, "Thank you." In the background, Richard, no longer Mr. Davis, but simply Richard, helped a customer fill out a form. When she smiled and said, "You're very kind," he didn't boast or joke. He just nodded. "I'm trying to be." Those words carried more truth than all his past speeches combined. Around noon, a delivery man arrived with a small wooden box addressed to the branch. Richard took it puzzled and opened it carefully. Inside lay a simple cross and carved from olive wood, smooth and beautiful. And beneath it, a note in the same familiar handwriting. For the one who burned paper but let his heart catch fire in the right way. "Jonathan," Richard smiled, tears forming again. He placed the cross above the main counter, where everyone could see it. No one asked why, they just knew it belonged there. That wooden cross became the silent heart of the branch. Customers started noticing it, often pausing for a second longer before leaving, as if reminded to be a little kinder, a little humbler, a little more human. Weeks passed. The story spread, not through tabloids or business reports, but through whispers, social posts, and phone calls. Did you hear what happened at Royal Crest Bank? Yeah, the manager insulted a man wearing a cross, and it turned out to be Jonathan Roumie. But he forgave him. He even promoted the old clerk. People didn't come to the bank now just for deposits or withdrawals. They came because it felt different. Because somewhere in that building, compassion had replaced ego. And Richard, he'd changed more than anyone thought possible. He stopped wearing the expensive suits and gold watches. Instead, he chose simplicity, not out of guilt, but gratitude. He volunteered at a local shelter every weekend. Sometimes he'd serve meals. Sometimes he'd just listen. When people asked him why, he always gave the same answer. Because someone once saw the good in me when I didn't deserve it. One evening, as the bank closed and the staff prepared to leave, Mrs. Henderson found Richard standing near the cross, lost in thought, thinking about him again. She asked gently. Richard smiled. Every day, but not because I feel ashamed anymore, because I feel inspired. She nodded. He changed this place without raising his voice. That's the power of real faith, Richard said softly. It doesn't shout. It shines. For a moment, neither spoke. They just stood there, watching the last rays of sunset filter through the glass, touching the cross like a gentle blessing. Outside, a quiet breeze swept down the street. And for a fleeting second, Richard thought he saw a familiar figure in the reflection of the glass doors. Jonathan, smiling, peaceful and proud. He blinked and the image was gone, but something inside him whispered, "It doesn't matter if he's here or not. The lesson stays." And that's the truth behind every act of kindness. Respect isn't about who's powerful, rich or important. It's about how we treat people when we think no one's watching, because one day the person we dismiss might be the very person who defines our destiny. Jonathan didn't teach with words. He taught by example. He showed that forgiveness can humble the proud and humility can heal the broken. And the most powerful part? He didn't do it for revenge or applause or even justice. He did it out of love. That's what makes this story more than a lesson. It's a mirror for every one of us who's ever looked down on someone or been looked down upon. So the next time you see someone different, someone quiet, someone simple, someone who doesn't look the part, remember this story. Because you never know who they really are, and you never know how your kindness might change a life, or even your own. If you believe in respect, forgiveness, and faith, type faith in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And salute to everyone who treats people right, not because of who they are, but because of who you are. Because true strength isn't in dominance, it's in grace. And true power is kindness in silence.